Hi, I'm Eva Spiegel, Communications and Media Officer with the City of Vacaville, and welcome to another episode of What's the Plan? Today we have a really important topic, housing, and joining me is Barton Brierly. He is the Director of Community Development here in Vacaville. Barton, thanks for coming.
Good to be here, Eva.
Yeah, we've got a really interesting topic. You know that I'm fascinated by housing and what that means. And there's a lot of talk, here in Vacaville and at the state level too, about housing and housing issues and housing affordability. And we've got something to really talk about here in our community.
Yeah, it really affects us here in Vacaville, so it's a good thing that we talk about it and we know where we're going with it.
Exactly. And housing is a term that is this sort of generic term, but if you think about it, housing has a lot of different meanings. And how would you define it sort of in that planning, land use, sort of civic way?
Well, housing is everything. Sometimes people think of housing as being single-family houses, or some people think of housing as just apartments. But really, housing's all of that. It's anywhere you live is housing. So it can be a manufactured home, it might be a duplex, duet, apartment, condominium. All of that is housing.
Great. And, so the city, we zone for housing. We aren't in the housing construction business, right?
Right.
But we do have policies around housing. And so what are the kind of the policies in our general plan that really, identify what we want to do as a community, how we want to develop and grow and build housing?
So a couple of the policies are to provide high quality housing in a range of residential densities and types. So the city is encouraging really a variety of housing, not just one type, and to also encourage development that broadens the choice of type, size, and affordability of housing in Vacaville. So, we're not don't want to limit ourselves to just one kind of housing. Do we need single-family housing? Yes, we do. Do we need apartments? We do. We need a variety because in different stages of life, people need different kinds of housing. If you're a young single apartment might be just perfect for you. If you are a family with the kids and the dogs and the cats, that single family house with yard might be perfect for you. If you're a senior, you may not want all that space anymore. You may want to downsize into a small cottage, or you may want an apartment. So all those different kinds of housing types are important for the community.
So we've got these different housing types, and everything from an apartment to a condo to a single family detached, or you've got kind of row houses even in some places, and that's all part of the city's plan?
Yes, we have a general plan, and we've carefully planned so that we have enough land for each of those types of housing and that we have enough to accommodate what we forecast as our need.
So you said the word density earlier, which I know from kind of background in this issue, but what does that actually mean in terms of community building and what we have here in Vacaville?
So density is simply the number of housing units that you have on a particular acre of land. And so you might have low density housing, which is more single family homes. You might have high density housing that's apartments or duplexes or just more dwelling units on a piece of land. And really both are very desirable. If you want, again, that yard and the space and for the dog to run and everything, a low density house might be perfect for you. Some of the advantages of higher density housing is it's usually lower cost, you're using less land, it conserves land. So that, one thing people really like about Vacaville is our rural surrounding, that we have farmland, we have the hillsides. Well, if you can have higher density housing within the city, then you're helping to preserve that open space.
And that actually also kind of works with a lot of the goals that are coming out of the state too, right? They want, denser housing, they want to preserve open space, they want, they want more affordability.
Yes, and it really meets our goals of having that variety of housing types. We don't want all high density, we don't want all low density.
So, and I think I mentioned earlier, and this is a big discussion in the policy level at the city level, is cities don't necessarily build housing. So we zone for it, we identify where it should go and maybe at what density, but how does housing get built here in California?
Housing is almost all done by private developers on privately owned land. So, we're working all the time with, property owner that may have had a 20-acre parcel. It may have been the family farm for years. It's in the city now. And so it's privately owned, and you get a private developer who purchases the property and develops it and builds it all with private money and to make a profit. And and so a lot of the policies they talk about, well, is the city's building this housing, or the city should build this housing, or the city isn't doing enough of this, or the city, but really the city doesn't build housing.
We zone for it.
Yes.
So Barton, here in Vacaville, we've got a mix of housing. I know there's single family, there are attached homes, there are apartments or condos. Can you give us a little bit of a breakdown of what those numbers are?
Yes. People think that Vacaville is all single family homes, but actually it's a good variety. It's about 71% of the housing is single family housing. About 21% is apartments and condominiums and townhomes. We have about 4% are manufactured homes. There's actually a lot of manufactured homes in Vacaville if you go around, and about 4% is duplexes and duets.
And in our general plan, and we've got the housing element, are those numbers kind of the mix of what we have? Does that really work for us, or are we looking at something different into the future as things change?
So we're looking at keeping about that same balance. So the general plan has set a goal for 75% single-family homes and 25% attached homes, and that's really seems to be the good mix to provide that variety of housing types, so that kids who graduate from Vaca High can still live in Vacaville, maybe get their first apartment here, or the kids coming back can live here, and still have that predominantly single-family home atmosphere in Vacaville.
This is probably a silly question, but my background is more of at the state level. So that's our mix here in Vacaville. But is that sort of a good ratio for any community, or that's just what works for our community, and what works for us may not be what works for the adjacent city or cities 100 miles away?
It's really what works for Vacaville. There's a large variety in California. You have rural communities may not have as much multifamily. More dense areas, urban areas might have a whole lot of multifamily. So that's what we've really determined is the right mix for Vacaville.
Great. And, housing construction is a big deal. And I'm just curious, driving around town, I've seen a lot of developments, a lot of construction, but I really am not sure what that means. So what is the quantity that we've got going on right now?
So in the last about 6-7 years, there's been about 325 dwelling units built in Vacaville, and it's been primarily single family. But it's not been all single family. So that 325 includes some of the multifamily. And that's been about the trend. And our general plan, we forecast about 445 per year. So we're getting pretty close to our forecast on that. And again, it's almost entirely private built projects. And
one of the questions and I keep hearing about is the people who maybe finish high school and then they do vocational training, or maybe they've gone to college and they want to come back home, and it's harder for them to find housing that is affordable to them. What's happening on that front? That missing middle is what I've heard the term is called.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we're really missing that that middle. It's very difficult to find the apartments, the townhomes, the more affordable kinds of housing that the workers who live in Vacaville would want to build. I know we've got employees that work for the city that live elsewhere because they can't find housing there. There's employees that work at our local manufacturers and local retailers and all that are having a difficult time finding housing. So that there is a big gap there.
And but I would also want to say that yes, this is a gap in Vacaville, but it's happening statewide. So we are not the only community that's facing some of these issues, and not the only ones grappling with how do we make sure that people can live in our communities, but access them, live, work, recreate.
Yeah.
So I know that there's the question about we zone for housing, and then there are developers that come in and they put in permits to build housing. Mm-hmm. So what do we have sort of in the pipeline that we can look forward to, or that we're looking at as maybe happening here?
We've actually approved quite a few projects that are really long-term projects. We did like the Farm at Alamo Creek project and the Roberts Ranch project recently. In North Village, there's a whole another phase in North Village. So we actually have a lot of land to accommodate housing for the next decade, really. Where we're short is the multifamily. There's a few multifamily projects that have been approved. The Casa de Vista project, everyone asks about what's happening on to the site that's next to the Travis Credit Union on Allison Drive. Well, that's a 248 unit apartment complex going in. But we're really short on that. We don't have very many of those multifamily and townhome projects to meet that missing middle.
One of the other things which I've always wondered about is how do you define what is affordable housing, or attainable housing might be a better term?
Yes.
Because what's affordable to one individual or family may not be to another. But in that traditional affordable housing definition, how do we describe that in terms of the need?
Well, generally, you look at a household shouldn't spend more than about 30% of their household income on housing. And so if you look at what an income is and you take 30% of that, that's what you should be able to afford for your rent or your mortgage, including your utilities and things like that. And the median household income in Vacaville is about $77,000, which to me is a lot. That's a great income for a lot of families. But if you look at the median house price is over $450,000 now, and even the rents for two-bedroom apartments upwards of $1,900. That's, if you figure 30% of a $77,000 income, really that's tough to meet that. So if you pay more than that, you're cost burdened, or you're trying to find housing somewhere else, and then that's just the median income. And so if you're low income, you can still be a good hard worker. Maybe you work at a retail store, or you're a hairdresser, or things like that. You can still be making a good income, and but housing affordability, you may be able to afford a studio apartment if you could find one in Vacaville. So that's how we look at affordability.
Now, we talked about affordable housing, but is there assistance for people who need it, who need affordable housing assistance?
Yes, there is. We do have a housing services department that provides a lot of housing. We have a first-time home buyers program that they can help with. There's a Section 8 housing voucher program that they help with. And so there is that ability, and if somebody needs assistance, contact our housing services department.
And there's a project that you and I worked on together, which was this great housing brochure. We wanted to spend some time and put together a collateral material that we can use to talk with not only our council members and developers, but members of the public about what housing in Vacaville is. So can we talk about that a little bit?
Yes, we provide this brochure, and it provides a lot of the information like we've talked about, because we get a lot of questions. People, there's development going on in your neighborhood, and you think, well, why do we need that? Or people are advocating for this kind of housing or that, or have concerns about what might be happening. So that's why we put that together. And so it's available on our website, it's available in the Community Development Office, and it just provides information about what kind of housing we have, what our needs are, what's approved, just what some of the affordability levels are. And we try to do it in a very simple, readable form, so you don't need a master's degree to understand it. So
you don't need to be an urban planner. I could understand it when I was working on it with you, right?
Right, yes.
So are there other topics that we want to share with people about housing and housing in Vacaville, and just to kind of educate everyone about what this is in our community?
I think we ought to talk about transportation and housing, because that's an important thing.
That is a very important thing.
One of the advantages of having housing close is that you don't have to travel as much. So I mentioned that we have employees that work for the city that have to commute into Vacaville to work, and so if we have more of that kind of housing, it actually lessens the impact on our transportation system.
And also improves quality of life, because if you are living close to where you work, you have more time for your families, to exercise, to read books, walk your dog, any of the things that are, enrich your life outside of your work.
Yes. And like one of the reasons we were very excited about the Casa de Vista apartment project is that's a higher density housing project, but it's right next to our transit center. It's right next to lots of restaurants. There's a grocery store nearby, and so it really cuts down on that travel and that overall traffic. So people think housing's going in is going to create more traffic, but a lot of times it just provides opportunities to really reduce.
Yeah, and it gives you more of a walkable life, right?
Yes.
Which is something we don't necessarily think about as much in California. We might think about walking in our green belts or our open spaces or up in the hills, but there's something to be said about being able to just walk out your door and run to the grocery store, pick up a snack, even meet friends for dinner, all without getting into your car.
And the other thing we ought to talk about is the tie with economic development.
Definitely.
We talk with the businesses about expanding, about bringing new business to Vacaville, and they always look at, well, what kind of housing? Where are my employees going to live? Economic development is important because those companies, they bring money into the community that helps fund our services, funds our parks, funds improvements to the community, and improves our quality of life. And so that's why we want to improve economic development, and housing goes right
definitely.
into it.
I mean, if you're a company, you're looking about locating here, thinking about what is the mix of the quality of life for your employees and why would you want to be here. So part of it's the infrastructure, what you can do for your business here, whether we have that kind of space, as well as what's the housing and the amenities that are going to make that quality of life so vibrant for them. And I think Vacaville's just got such a great mix of things to offer to residents. And housing is one of them, and accessibility is another one of them, and the beautiful hills is another one.
Yes, and recreation opportunities and great shopping and all that. Yeah, it's a really wonderful community.
It's a wonderful community, definitely. Well, thank you so much. I've learned a lot. It's a topic that I'm very interested in. I hope you have enjoyed this segment and learned about housing and Vacaville. Again, we've got this great housing brochure. It is available on our website. It is also available in our community development department, and we hope you find it useful. Thank you so much.